whole thing a matter rather than what it was, an investigation. Now, that's political pressure if there ever was such a thing, but Comey went along with it anyway.
We were getting to a place where the Attorney General and I were both going to have to testify and talk publicly about it, and I wanted to know, was she going to authorize us to confirm we had an investigation? And she said, yes, but don't call it that, call it a matter. And I said, why would I do that? And she said, just call it a matter. It gave the impression that the Attorney General was looking to align the way we talked about our work with the way a political campaign was describing the same activity, which was inaccurate.
But wait, there's inconsistent behavior here. Why did Comey agree to make untrue statements that echoed the Clinton campaign's talking points? He just admitted he did that. And then refused to publicly say something completely true about President Trump, namely that he was not under investigation. Why did Comey make and then leak detailed memos about his meetings with President Trump, but apparently do nothing in response to the political pressure he received from the previous Attorney General, Loretta Lynch? And was this the only time that the Obama administration exerted political pressure on James Comey? We still don't know the answer to that last question, and it might be worth asking. Fourth, we learned today that President Trump talks and acts a lot like a New York City real estate developer, one who is highly aggressive and does not understand the importance of precise language or care. Comey's testimony reveals a president who is used to the world of business, where the guy on top wields absolute authority and who doesn't yet grasp the sometimes vital nuances of managing the executive branch of government. Now, those nuances can be taught, obviously, but Comey also revealed that for some reason he didn't bother helping the president with this and instead let him just flail around and then took notes on it.
You told the president, I would see what we could do. What did you mean?
That was kind of a slightly cowardly way of trying to avoid telling him we're not going to do that, that I would see what we could do. It was a way of kind of getting off of Mr. Bente.
And finally, fifth and most important by far, we learned that the Russian collusion story, the one we've been force-fed by Democrats in the Congress and their handmaidens in the media for months now, is starting to look weaker than ever. The heart of this entire scandal, the reason we haven't been allowed to focus on the many actual problems in this country, is the claim that Donald Trump deliberately collaborated with Vladimir Putin's government in order to win power and undermine America's own fundamental interests. Now, if that's actually true, Comey didn't suggest it today or even come close. Instead, he confirmed that Trump was never under investigation and offered no evidence or testimony suggesting he should be under investigation. We've also been told that if Trump didn't actually collude with Russia himself, he maneuvered to protect those around him who did collaborate or collude with Russia. But Comey, in fact, declared just the opposite today. Trump told him that if his, quote, satellite associates did something wrong, it'd be good to catch them, that the FBI ought to continue looking into that. Sure, Trump expressed his hope that General Flynn would go free, but even Comey conceded that no one's ever been prosecuted for hoping anything.
You don't know of anyone that's ever been charged for hoping something. Is that a fair statement?
I don't, as I sit here.
So let's see, where are we now? A month of shrieking hype, millions of words of ink, hundreds of hours of the shrillest television ever produced add up to pretty much nothing. We've got precisely as much proof right now that President Trump committed treason as we had 7 months ago when all of this started. But that doesn't mean we've learned nothing. We have learned some things. We've seen the FBI exposed as a political battleground, and that is not reassuring to us citizens. We've had the executive branch's effectiveness compromised by dozens of politically motivated leaks, many of them untrue. We've had the media uncritically cheer on what has become unambiguously an attempt to bureaucratically overthrow a democratically elected leader. It's been a total disaster, a man-made one, and it's hard to see who outside of Washington has benefited from any of it. Congressman Mark Pocan represents Wisconsin. Congressman Tim Ryan represents Ohio. They're both Democrats, and they both watched the hearing stage to the extent that they could. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Congressman Ryan, first to you. How does any of this help your constituents back in Ohio?
It doesn't. That's why we want to be talking about jobs. But your presentation there, Tucker, and I love you, but you left out the fact that the Republicans control the House, Republicans control the Senate. That was a Republican hearing we just saw.
That's true.
Both of those Republican committees are trying to investigate this, are investigating this. So it's not a Democratic initiative on our part. It's Republicans. You talk about. Hold on, let me finish.
That's a fair point. I'm not here to defend Republicans, But the storyline is being driven by Democrats, and some Republicans stupidly are going along with it. I agree.
We drive a lot of stories that when you have a congressional investigation by Republicans, it should elevate this whole debate above partisan politics, which is what we're trying to do here. You also mentioned Comey with Loretta Lynch. I don't think Loretta Lynch or Hillary Clinton or anyone else thinks James Comey was taking a dive for the Democrats.
Well, then,
so your whole presentation there completely misconstrued, really, in my estimation, the facts on the ground.
Taking a dive for the Democrats, I think that James Comey, Congressman Pocan, admitted today, not to get too precise about it, Loretta Lynch's command to refer to this as a matter rather than an investigation, and that was a Clinton campaign talking point. I'm not saying anyone ought to be impeached over it, but it does raise the question, to what extent was the previous administration putting political pressure on this guy?
Tucker, you showed about 6 minutes of a 3-hour hearing. There's another 2 hours and 54 minutes where he said that the president lied, but he said that the president lied. He talked about Vice President Pence maybe knowing about Michael Flynn before he previously has admitted he knew about the situation around Michael Flynn. We learned a whole lot of other things that should make every American, regardless of political party, very concerned. So
really, so what exactly? And please be specific. What have we learned about the core allegation? The whole reason we're doing this is because the left alleged that they lost the election because Russia somehow hacked our election with the help of Donald Trump. Did we learn anything about that today?
What we learned when 17 intelligence agencies told us the Russians tried to interfere and did with our elections.
That's not a true fact. 17 did not. 3 out of 17, just as a factual matter.
I've read the classified report, and I can tell you without a question, we know they interfered with our elections with the intent of electing Donald Trump. So we know that. The question is, when you heard this testimony, we're finding out more and more about the possible collusion between not just the campaign officials of Donald Trump, but perhaps people in the cabinet, perhaps his family members.
Really, so let's be really specific, because we've gone back and forth for 7 months, you and I. What specifically did we learn today about, and I'm quoting you, the collusion between the Trump people and the government of Vladimir Putin?
We heard outright that the president lied about how he's been describing the narrative of the conversations that he had with the FBI director. So that alone tells us that there's
collusion between Trump and Putin?
Obstruction of justice, closer and closer to all these issues. I would argue, Tucker, don't you think,
go back and answer my question? Where's the evidence of collusion?
If there was collusion,
that you just alluded
if there was
to?
Collusion during the campaign, wouldn't you say that's treasonous?
Well, I would say it's crazy. It's horrible if a president is acting against his own country's interest. So my question is, you're paralyzing government right now.
We're trying to get to the bottom of this.
You represent a state. Hold on. Where, after 7 months, is any evidence? I keep asking you, and you haven't provided any evidence. 7 months. Like, what is this?
There's been no formal investigation. We have a head of the Republican head of the Intelligence Committee who has to recuse himself. We have an Attorney General who had to recuse himself. Let's have an independent commission. If the president has nothing to hide, he should be for an independent commission so we can move on to jobs and health care and everything else we need to do.
Okay, so here's the lead, Congressman Ryan, in the Cleveland Plain Dealer, hardly a right-wing newspaper today. How can government help in the opioid crisis? Ohio matters. The Comey stuff is buried in the back section because the truth is, and I'm not just saying this demagogically, it's true, this stuff is a distraction from a country that's hurting. Your district, you are well known for caring about the issues in your district, none of which include Russia. This is paralyzing our government, and there's still no evidence it's real. So, like, what's the point of all this?
It's paralyzing our government because Donald Trump fired the head of the FBI who was investigating him, potentially, his campaign, absolutely, about Russian influence in our presidential election and possibly tipping the balance. So if Trump wanted us to talk about jobs, hold on, I'm not finished. If he wanted us to talk about jobs, he should have left Comey in place, let the investigation move forward, say to the American people, there's nothing to hide here, I'm not going to lie about anything.
So stupid. I mean, the investigation is going forward, actually, as you well know. It's in progress right now. The criminal investigation by the FBI is in progress. It would never slow for one day.
And so is the Republican Senate and Republican House Intelligence Committees.
Here's the point. At some juncture, members of Congress who are using this scandal to distract from the fact that they've alienated the American working class and unions and all your traditional base, they're not for you anymore. Instead of dealing with their problems, it's like Russia, Russia, Russia. And I'm just waiting for the day when someone can say, is there evidence?
Tucker, are you not going to ask Donald Trump to take any responsibility at all for this?
What?
For firing the head of the FBI who was investigating him.
To fire the guy, but the core allegation
and then think everyone's just going to go back to doing business? He fired the head of the FBI who's investigating his administration. What the hell did he think was going to happen?
Can you honestly look at me right in the face and say that James Comey should have been the head of the FBI after the behavior he displayed during this election. No normal person watching that can say, I want this guy to be FBI director. No, I'm serious. After what he did to Hillary Clinton and going back and forth.
Oh, my goodness.
No, I'm not joking.
I'm amazed at your concern for Hillary Clinton.
I'm not concerned. I'm concerned about the rule of law.
The last time I was on, I said, look, if he fired him the day after he was inaugurated, okay, fine.
I honestly think this may be the last time I speak to Democrats about Russia, because I feel like it's fundamentally unreasonable. If the president collaborated with a foreign power, that is treason. It's a huge charge to make. All this time has been spent looking into it, and we are no closer to showing that actually happened. Can you concede that or not? I'm not defending Trump as an American.
Every single week, we've had more information
that there's
about what's
collusion between Trump and Russia. Are you kidding? Where is it?
Trump campaign officials. Most recently, Jared Kushner is now being questioned. His son-in-law. I mean, let's face it. Every single week, more and more trickles out.
So being questioned is the same as being guilty. Where's the evidence?
Independent commission could clear all this up.
Liberals are arguing
we could clear all this up, Tucker.
To imply something is the same as to prove it.
No, independent commission would clear all this up. If you have a attorney general who has to recuse himself, which is unusual, and then the Republican ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee has to recuse himself, there's a lot of unusual behavior going on.
For Putin. I totally agree. You guys read about the McCarthy period at all? I'm serious.
Tucker, why don't you ask President Trump to take any responsibility? Is he not responsible for any of this?
Colluding with Russia?
For firing the head of the FBI, for giving secrets to the Russians in the White House. I mean, how much further do you want to lie?
This is actually insane. This is insane. This is crazy. And that he somehow subverted American national security by giving secrets to the Russians in the White House.
But you're talking about paralyzing government, which we are right now, and you're trying to blame the Democrats who don't control the House or don't control the Senate.
Republicans as well. I think this whole story is a massive lie. I think it's mass hysteria at its worst, and I think it's scary how people can get so irrational. That's what I really say.
So I don't want you talking to Republicans either now.
Good point.
Okay.
Gentlemen, thank you. During his testimony, James Comey also admitted that the tarmac meeting between the Attorney General of the last administration, Loretta Lynch, and Bill Clinton was a turning point for the FBI.
Let me go back, if I can, very briefly, to the decision to publicly go out with your results on the email. Was your decision influenced by the Attorney General's tarmac meeting with the former President Bill Clinton?
Yes, in a ultimately conclusive way. That was the thing that capped it for me, that I had to do something separately to protect the credibility of the investigation, which meant both the FBI and the Justice Department.
Meanwhile, President Trump's attorney quickly described the hearing as a total vindication for his client.
Contrary to numerous false press accounts leading up to today's hearing, Mr. Comey has now finally confirmed publicly what he repeatedly told President Trump privately. That is, that the president was not under investigation as part of any probe into Russian interference. The president, Mr. Comey also admitted that there is no evidence that a single vote changed as a result of any Russian interference.
Well, Charles Krauthammer is, of course, a writer and I think the most popular columnist in the world. He joins us tonight to sort out what happened today. Charles, what did we learn?
Well, we learned that it was not a good day for Donald Trump or for Jim Comey. Trump, I think, is diminished simply by the fact that on a series of questions Comey was asked in which his version of their meetings, meaning Trump's, was questioned, Comey said it's not true. For example, who called whom? These are small things, but nonetheless, being called a liar, I think, has an effect. Comey is diminished by the fact, and he admitted it, he used the word cowardly to describe his reactions. And as you say, to the pressure from the Clinton administration not to use the word investigation, which was a way to please, to placate, to help the Clinton campaign. And then the questions everybody's asking, if you were being pressured on the Flynn issue and you felt improper pressure and what the Democrats would call obstruction of justice, why did you do nothing? Why didn't you say to the president, you're not supposed to do this? Why didn't you offer your resignation? Why didn't you go to the Attorney General? Or why didn't you go to Congress? And he basically said, I was stunned and I didn't know how to react. Well, you were stunned for about an hour or two. Then you had, a couple of months, but you didn't do it. Comey comes out diminished, I think, because he didn't react the way he should have. But to me, the ultimate irony is this. As you said, as you pointed out in the previous segment, the underlying charge, the reason that all this has sort of captured the country, is the charge that there was collusion with a foreign power to influence our election. There is no evidence yet, and it's been now since July of last year, that that is true. And the tragedy under all this is Trump had a human reaction to this. You're the head of the FBI. You've told me 3 times that I am not under investigation for this. You've told me privately. What Trump simply wanted was for that to be made public, so it would tamp down all of the wild accusations about him that were going in the press and that were sort of soaking into the public square. Comey didn't do that, and he gave a most peculiar reason for not going public. He said, because had I done that, I would have encountered the duty to change, the duty to revise what I had done the way he had with Hillary, right? He exonerated her at first, and then he had to come back on October 27. But if you're acting, as Comey is saying, that the rationale is because you're trying to protect Trump from a future event where Comey would have to contradict himself and say there's new evidence now. If you're trying to protect Trump, why not offer him the damn choice and say, why not? He never told Trump.
Also, I mean, you could say the same thing about any U.S. citizen. Charles, I'm not going to say you're not under investigation because someday you may be, and I would hate to have to correct myself.
It's a very weak reason. And the tragedy is if he had gone public, and I think it was a good, I think it was Rubio who said, how is it that everything else has been leaked except the fact that Trump was not under investigation?
I guess
that is a very peculiar
Trump should have leaked it to the New York Times, man. They got to get on. They got to get on the game.
Called up the Columbia professor and said, "Can you leak this story?" And that's what caused the firestorm.
That's perfect summation. Thank you, Charles.
My pleasure.
Well, the Comey hearing revealed that the media's unnamed sources have repeatedly given them false information, which they have published. The Hill's Joe Concha will be here next with what this says about the press and its methods. Also in the UK, Brits are having an election tonight. Nigel Farage will provide his take on the results, which look like they may be a huge shock to the world. Farage, you'll remember, has also been accused of being a Russian operative, along with most people we know. What does he think? Here's what he said last time.
I was involved with Brexit, I was involved with the Trump campaign, I was involved with upsetting their little world in 2016, therefore I must somehow be associated with the Russians. It is total and utter hysterical nonsense.
Well, today's hearing in the House was a lot of things, but among them, it was a very bad day for the media and their current stable of former officials who feed them stories off the record. During the hearing, James Comey said that a major New York Times story claiming that Donald Trump's campaign aides repeatedly met with Russian intelligence was full of falsehoods.
The New York Times wrote an article that suggested that the Trump campaign was colluding with the Russians. So the American people can understand this. That report by the New York Times was not true. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, in the main, it was not true. The people talking about it often don't really know what's going on, and those of us who actually know what's going on are not talking about it. And we don't call the press to say, hey, you got that thing wrong about this sensitive topic.
Wow, it was weird. The New York Times was full of falsehoods. That's so strange. Meanwhile, over at CNN, one of their analysts was claiming that Comey would refute Trump's claim that he was not under FBI investigation.
He will dispute that he ever assured the president that he was not under any kind of investigation.
Keep in mind, we know that for sure because it was from an unnamed source of impeachable integrity, except it turned out to be a lie. Oops. Joe Concha writes about the media for The Hill, and he joins us tonight. So, look, everybody in the press uses anonymous sources. I have a lot. But you got to be really careful because these people have, by definition, an agenda, and they're hiding behind the cloak of anonymity, and you can't just run with what they say because you're going to get burned, as these guys just were, but they're not embarrassed.
That's correct, Tucker. When you go ahead with unnamed sources, as you said, you don't know about their agenda. They may be lying about the access they have to the person, like Comey just said, as well. So this is what we've seen now for 5 months. Every bombshell that has involved Trump and Russia has been a story with no named sources whatsoever. And people at home don't know what to make of what's true and what's not. And in CNN's case, this shows really what happens when you go ahead. In this case, it was only one unnamed source, and go on national television and talk about it as if it's fact. And then other publications and outlets pick it up as if it was walked down a mountain and it's gospel as well.
See, the problem is everyone's lying right now. Washington is a hall of mirrors. It's very hard to know what's true. I experience this every single day. And if you go into covering a story knowing what the answer is, you're going to get burned and you're going to get used. These guys all think they know what they're going to find, so anything that confirms their pre-existing suspicions, they just go with.
I think Comey had the best analogy where he said it's like feeding seagulls at the shore. I grew up at the Jersey Shore. I've seen this. You throw a crumb in the air and 2 seagulls come. You throw another and 50 come, and they don't even know what they're eating. And it's the same thing with the press. You throw up something, the New York Times and the Washington Post reports it, and everybody else comes in. They don't care what it is. They just love the narrative too much. But to the New York Times, you mentioned them before, they have followed up since as far as their story being wrong on February 14th. This is what they say, quote, "The original sources could not be reached after Mr. Comey's remarks." Wait a minute. 4 sources, senior people. Suddenly no one can find them? They don't want to go on the record or off the record in this case to confirm that the story was true or not, that Comey said was BS? That's interesting, Tucker.
What's interesting is when you have people covering this who are covering it in terms of the personalities and the moral status of the people involved, not really as an adult series of events, which it is. There was an exchange on MSNBC today that really kind of said it all as far as I'm concerned. This is one of their anchors responding to Donald Trump Jr.'s tweets about the hearings. Watch this.
For, a guy who kills baby elephants for kicks to be giving James Comey a lesson in character and strength of character is rich at best and pathetic at worst.
So in other words, you're a bad person, shut up. That's not really journalism, is it?
That is a perfect example of what I've been talking about in terms of this need for people to be, in terms of this, a host in Nicole Wallace, whose ratings are horrible right now. She has a new show at 4 o'clock, to be as shocking, as melodramatic as possible. So then we're talking about it on other shows, or it goes on to other publications and it goes viral. So that's now the goal, to go as viral as possible. But one more point, Tucker, if you don't mind, because I was disappointed in the Senate Intelligence Committee today, who I thought asked good questions for the most part. But there was one that the American public was begging to be asked, and that was, Mr. Comey, when you had that private dinner at the White House and dessert was served, was 2 scoops of ice cream served to Donald Trump? Did you only get 1, and did you get the flavor you requested?
What does he like? Does he like his steak rare or well done? No, those are the questions. I agree, Joe. Thanks for bringing that up. Great to see you.
Good to see you.
Well, yesterday, former federal prosecutor Andy McCarthy told us what we ought to expect from Jim Comey's testimony. Today, he's back. We'll find out how accurate he was. Stay tuned.
Just seek for a way for Mike Flynn to save face.
I don't think it's for me to say whether the conversation I had with the president was an effort to obstruct. I took it as a very disturbing thing, very concerning, but that's a conclusion I'm sure the special counsel will work towards to try and understand what the intention was there and whether that's an offense.
Well, yesterday we had former federal prosecutor Andrew McCarthy on the show, one of the clearest writers about legal matters anywhere, and he made some predictions about what happened today at the Comey hearings. One of them was that Comey wouldn't offer much evidence to support the president had committed obstruction of justice. So how did he do on that and the rest of his predictions? Andrew McCarthy joins us tonight. So did what you thought would happen?
Well, yes and no. How's that for a lawyer's answer?
It's good.
I think his testimony as it unfolds undermines the obstruction case. But what I found disturbing is kind of what looks to me like a post hoc attempt to construct an obstruction case that wasn't there in the first instance. So to be more clear about that, I think if you listen to his story, there's no proof beyond a reasonable doubt of corrupt behavior. The president's allowed to influence the executive branch. So all the problems we discussed last night are still there, and the case isn't there. But here's what he did. He said in the clip that you just played you know, it wasn't my place to decide whether that was obstruction. Yes, it was, you know, right there and then. There's nobody in America that knows the law of obstruction of justice better than Jim Comey does. He's a top prosecutor and top cop in federal cop in America for, you know, the better part of his professional career. And in the Justice Department and in all these jobs, if you are asked to do something that's illegal or unethical or immoral, your choice is to resign or carry out the order. Your choice is not to say, well, you know, I don't really know what that was about. And I was quite startled to hear him say that he knew, or he now suddenly is taking this to be that he was being told to dismiss the case, not just that Trump was saying that he hoped that he would see the Flynn case his way, and that he disobeyed the order as he understood it intentionally, right, which is something you're never, ever supposed to do. That's insubordination.
Right, unless you're just a careerist at heart, which applies to a lot of people here. So really quickly, the thing that I've never been able to get over is the FBI director comes out and corrects the record on behalf of Hillary Clinton during the campaign, but refuses to with his new boss, President Trump. Why is that? Is that consistent?
Well, you know, there are two different kinds of investigations. I think that it's not consistent, but the problem is, once you go down the road that he went down last July, where he basically, there's a rule that says basically if you're the government, you speak in court when you're ready to charge somebody. Right. Until then, you keep your mouth shut and you don't talk about investigations or suspects. He's trying to reel that back after having done it. So, in theory, every case he handles is inconsistent with the way he handled
well, that's
a
good point. Then maybe he shouldn't have corrected the record with Trump or with Hillary. Thanks a lot, Andrew McCarthy. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thanks.
President Trump and his advisors not the only ones who've been repeatedly called criminals and spies without evidence in this McCarthyite moment we're living through. Former UK Independence Party leader Nigel Farage has also been labeled by unnamed sources as a Putin operative. What do you think of the hearing today? Did he call Putin with an update? We'll get his take on that in just a minute. Nigel Farage joins us now. So, Nigel, have you spoken to Vladimir Putin recently? And what did you think of the hearings?
No, I've not been in touch with Putin for all days now. Please don't take that seriously. As you say, we are living through a sort of McCarthyite-style era. I think the most important takeout for me is that nothing that came out today, frankly, lays a finger on the president at all. And I thought that Comey came across as somebody who was busy playing political games, leaking. I thought he came across very badly indeed. And I must say, having seen that testimony, I think Trump was absolutely right to sack him.
Huh. So, I mean, what did you make of the fact that the FBI director himself was leaking stories to the press? Did that seem odd to you as someone from another country looking in, that the head law enforcement official in America would be leaking stories?
It doesn't seem odd. It seems disgraceful. You know, he was playing political games, you know, whilst holding a very important position. No, I mean, I do get the feeling that sort of so much of the establishment seems to want Trump to fail and is trying to trip him up at every given opportunity. Well, you know what? They haven't succeeded today, and Comey comes across, frankly, as being somewhat disingenuous.
Yeah, and the president's been helping them, I have to say, in some ways. So really quickly, there's an election going on in your island nation tonight, and it looks like the Labor candidate, Jeremy Corbyn, is doing much better than anyone, at least in this country, expected. Does he have a shot of winning, and what would that mean?
Well, what he did, Corbyn, he said, you know, we will leave the European Union. He kind of boxed off that issue. And I think in the end, what this campaign was about was personality. Now, Theresa May was a Remainer who was trying to sell Brexit, but not really believing it. She came across as wooden, as robotic. She refused to go out and really meet the public. And Corbyn, who's an old lefty, I mean, he's virtually a Marxist.
Oh, yeah.
He looked comfortable. You know, he looked comfortable in his own skin. Look, if tomorrow Jeremy Corbyn forms a coalition and becomes Prime Minister, it is very bad news for Brexit, and it's very bad news for Anglo-American relations. This guy has been anti-American for the whole of his political career, and it looks like we could be on the verge with this election Theresa May have made by calling this early election, a really historic mistake.
Boy, I mean, at least from what I'm saying right now, that's a terrifying possibility. So say a prayer. Nigel Farage, great to see you.
Thank you.
Comey's testimony today didn't do much to encourage further investigation of President Trump, but what about Comey himself? Some are saying it's time to consider investigating him. Radio show host Dana Lash will be here with that perspective in just moments.